on, just me and you. Tell me, Chicky, wow, what you gonna do? Hey!
Hi, it's Garbo, and this is Tuesday Thing. So I've got my very worn paperback copy of Alfred Hitchcock's A Baker's Dozen of Suspense Stories here. And Ella St. Joseph's story is Third from the End. It's too long to read, especially because the print is very small, and I would really struggle to try to read it adequately, and I think it would take up a lot of time. So what I'll do is summarize the story. Mr. Campaspe is fat. He's married to a woman who seemed to accept him when they got married. You know, he didn't gain weight after the marriage. He was the same person she married. But he had suspected that she was dissatisfied with him. While he was working in the city, he caught on that she had a secret boyfriend in their place that they go to near the water for the weekends. So he catches his wife and Otto, the younger guy, hanging out together by the beach, and he doesn't see anything directly, suspicious, but he's wise to what's going on. The story is a lot of Mr. Campaspe's dissatisfaction with his own body, or renewed awareness of how other people see him. And Otto is more athletic and physically attractive. So he is tormenting Mr. Campaspe. They are all going to go swimming together, the three of them. There's a lot of discomfort around Mr. Campaspe not wanting to get changed into his swimming trunks with Otto. And Otto wants to torment Mr. Campaspe about his body size. Mr. Campaspe keeps saying it's modesty that makes him want to undress comfortably by himself. And there's a lot of tug of war about this, because even though he recognizes that Otto is trying to humiliate him, he also outmaneuvers Otto, and eventually they kind of work out a thing where they get dressed back to back, basically. Then Otto becomes paranoid, and he's starting to lose his confidence. For instance, when the two men are walking down toward the beach, a child laughs, and he's actually laughing at the larger man's body, but Otto thinks that the teenager is making fun of him and strikes the teenager. Mr. Campaspe's wife is aware of the fact that her husband might seem mild on the surface, but that he's got more tricks up his sleeve than the younger man might realize. And she repeatedly warns Otto not to be tricked by her husband, not to fall for his ideas. But Otto is getting more and more insecure and feels more and more threatened, because the two of them are obviously struggling over who will be in love with the wife now. So Mr. Campaspe challenges Otto to a race in which they will run down the beach, jump in the water, swim to a point, turn around and swim back. And Otto says, "So you think you can run faster than me on the beach?" And Mr. Campaspe says, "No, I can't run faster, but I can swim faster." And Otto is disbelieving. But Mr. Campaspe's wife says, "No, he's a really good swimmer, believe him. He's up to a trick," and Otto won't go for it. So the two men swim out, and it's very Alfred Hitchcock Presents. There's just a lot of tension and suspense going through the story about what's going to happen. So I'm going to pick up the story right as Mr. Campaspe has made his move actively to try to drown Otto while they're far out from shore. And he's finding it harder to drown the smaller man than he thought it would be. No sooner had Otto's eyes opened upon green water than he grabbed whole handfuls of Mr. Campaspe's flesh, pulled at him savagely, ripped the fat man's trunks, and so rigorously clamped him that if Otto sank to the bottom, he would bring down his assailant with him. Over and over they rolled, now above the water, splashing and grunting, now under, locked in hushed, murderous embrace. Panting and coughing, Mr. Campaspe fought to keep Otto below, but despite his exceeding weight, he was unable to pry free from the powerful hold that Otto had on him, or to break the man's hold on life itself. How the fat man gloried in the pain of his clutched flesh! Mr. Campaspe hated that flesh even beyond Otto's hatred of it, and blissfully he gave it away that he might be free. Finally he found means to finish the combat. With Otto clinging to him like a drowning infant, Mr. Campaspe rose bodily from the ocean, filled his lungs full of air, and sounded the shuddering billows. Down they went together. The water became a maelstrom about them, green, then gray, roiling before their eyes, muffling the heartbeat in their ears. Down, slowly down, as a minute flowed by, and more. At last Otto's mouth broke open. Bubbles rolled out into Mr. Campaspe's face. The entangling fingers and knees relaxed their passionate hold, and the young man's body quietly fell away from him after the orgasm of death. When Mr. Campaspe uprose to the surface, he beheld a new world about him. It was a very silent, empty, and awesome world. Apathetic, stunned by the murder, he listened profoundly. The silence was appalling. He looked upward, but the clouds were too distant to catch hold of, and there was no sound in heaven. A last bubble rose and broke with the sound of thunder on the waves. Again the old world surrounded him. Again he heard the clopping gait of white horses up the whale path, and from the shore, faintly over the carrying water, the combined cry of happy men and holiday makers came to him as a prolonged wail of human woe. He looked to the beach and witnessed a great commotion, a running and panic which blackened the sands with people and brought the bathers down to the water's rim, where they stood, pointing with their outstretched arms to the sea. He had been seen. Thousands of eyes were upon him. Frozen with fear, he watched men plowing into the water, catamarans being launched, and Mr. Campaspe was powerless to flee from them. Like bits of the land broken from shore, they came to claim him who belonged to the sea. Unexpectedly, their direction altered, and following their new path with his eyes, he learned that it was not he they wanted, nor he that they had noticed. But between Mr. Campaspe and the beach, a tiny dot, a human head, now on the surface, now beneath, fighting for life, appearing and disappearing, flashing a telegraphic message for help. Treading water slowly, secure now and safely hidden, Mr. Campaspe watched hundreds of people bent upon the rescue of one human life, bringing effort, hope, and prayer to the saving of it. And he balanced the great labor of preserving life with the comparative ease of taking it. Terror possessed him. With the bit of horror clamped between his teeth, he made for the beach. He awakened to a realization that the tide had turned. The waters were running out. He was further from land than he had ever been before, and he began to battle with the ocean itself, with his own destiny, struggling to gain the beach. But apparently the land sent out great waves to repulse him and drive him away. Mr. Campaspe was no longer calm. The movements of his vast body made the waters boil. The waves spouted high their defiance to the sky, and flew like spittle before the battering charge of his direct attack. Open-mouthed but unheard, he thundered silence to the sea, but the more ponderously he tossed about, the deeper he sank, and the farther he drifted from shore. When Mr. Campaspe had turned finally, tired of fighting himself, and outward passed with the tide, his way was clear. He swam out and out, until it seemed that he had no weight, no body at all.